In this video I'm going to show you how to build a hop-up tracer unit, also commonly referred to as a Hutu. To build a Hutu, it requires you permanently modifying your current hop-up unit. Essentially, you will be installing LEDs into your hop-up unit so that when you use glow-in-the-dark BBs, it will illuminate them and give you the tracer effect when playing night games. I'm not going to get into comparisons between tracer units versus Hutus as far as quality or longevity or brightness of the BB, but I will say that putting a Hutu in your gun can cost anywhere from $5 to $10 versus the $100 to $120 price tag on the higher end tracer units. That being said, and provided that you still want to continue, there are some specifics that you need to get for this process to work appropriately. First up are the LEDs. You'll want to use super bright blue 3mm LEDs. I use 15,000 MCD LEDs. I personally have not been able to find the super bright 3mm LEDs anywhere as far as local electronics go. I usually go to eBay for where I purchase mine. I've read reports from people who use ultraviolet LEDs in their Hutu setups, but I've never actually personally used them. Some people say they're better, but as far as I know, the 15,000 MCD LEDs work pretty good. Next, you're going to need a resistor. There's a very scientific, complex way to calculate what type of resistor you actually need based off of your battery voltage and the forward voltage of the LEDs themselves. In most of the Hutus that I've installed, I just use a 220 ohm resistor. Refer to the link in the description of this video for the complex method of figuring this out, as well as a detailed written explanation of the process that I'm showing here in the video. For this demonstration, I'm going to be installing a Hutu in a SOCOM Gear M4. The M4 has a metal hop-up and is wired to the front. Also, before you get started, I highly recommend you wire up a way to actually check the LEDs through this process to make sure that nothing got burned out or the LEDs quit working on you for some reason. I picked up a 9-volt battery power connector from Radio Shack and wired in a resistor on the end so that way I can connect the proper poles and light up the LED to make sure that they still work. First off, you need to prep the LEDs. I'll show you why later on, but essentially what you need to do is you need to cut the top portion of the domed reflective part of the LED off. I like to use a Dremel and a soft cutting disc to grind down the top of the dome. Grind off as much as possible, but don't grind too far. And then you want to double check your work, make sure that the LED still lights up. Once you've removed the top portion of the LED, it'll now be kind of a cloudy, milky surface. You will want to take a polishing wheel and go ahead and polish the surface of it until it's nice and clear again. Now that you have your LEDs prepped and ready to be installed, you need to figure out where you want to put them in the hop-up. You'll see here in this picture that the sides of the hop-up, the top and the bottom in the picture, there's plenty of room to put the LEDs in and run the wires needed. Most M4s that are wired to the front will have the wires coming out of the gearbox on the left side of the gun, so we're going to run our Hutu connection wires on the right side where there's more space. Go ahead and remove the upper receiver and get to where you have the hop-up and barrel assembly. I'm not going to go into the disassembly instructions, there's plenty of other videos out there on how to do it. You will need to use either a 1/8 or a 7/64 drill bit. This depends on the drill bit size and set. Next you will need to select the location on the sides of the hop-up to drill your holes. Go ahead and proceed with drilling. When you are done drilling, you'll need to take a small round file and file down the inside of the holes to make sure that there's no burrs or any pieces of metal or plastic sticking in the hop-up chamber, preventing a BB from freely floating through it. You can see here is an LED without the globe cut off. You can see how it protrudes into the chamber. This is why we cut the top off in the previous step. Here's the cut LED with no protrusion in the hop-up. For the next step, we'll need to glue the LEDs into the hop-up. I personally use shoe glue for this because I have a lot of it on hand and it works pretty well. But any sort of super glue will work. One important thing to remember here is to keep your positive and negative sides the same. Remember the picture of the LED? There's a flat surface on one side of it. The post that is closest to the flat side is the negative side. We're going to be wiring these in parallel, so we're going to attach positive to positive and negative to negative. Repeat this process for the other side as well, and wait till the glue cures and hardens properly. For this example, I have the negative terminal on the top side of the hop-up. As I stated before, we're going to be attaching our wiring on the right side of the hop-up. So you'll want to carefully bend the terminals from the LED on the left side around to the right side. Next, you will need to solder the two LEDs together. I highly recommend that you use a heat sink to help distribute the heat moving down the wire from the soldering iron so as to not damage the LED during the process. Once you have both wires soldered, I always like to double check, better safe than sorry, to make sure that the LEDs are still working and that they didn't get damaged. Next, you need to solder on your connecting wires. I used a male JST connector because it's a small connector that'll easily fit through the opening in the outer barrel for the wires. Negative to negative, positive to positive, and then a quick double check at the end to make sure that you didn't overheat the LEDs. Now you want to seal these up to protect them from making any metal on metal contact or absorbing any moisture and blowing anything out. I like to use hot glue for this. You'll see here in the video that I overpaid on a ridiculously expensive hot glue from China that is actually black. This helps prevent any light from shining out of the shell of the gun. Now that the hard part is done, we need to go ahead and wire up our switch and connect the Hutu to the main power line. For the switch, the one that I'm using here is a single pole dual throw switch, but you only need a single pole single throw switch, so I'm going to go ahead and just disregard one of the outside prongs there that you see on the switch. Since I have a little bit of room, I'm going to go ahead and glue the resistor to the switch itself. That way it'll save a little bit and make it a little bit easier to solder it on. With my resistor in place, I'm going to go ahead and solder it to one of the terminals. For the wiring, I'm going to be using the female side of the male JST connector that I hooked up to the Hutu itself. All we're going to be doing is interrupting the power on the positive wire, so that's the red one. So all you need to do is clip the red and attach one end to the resistor and one end to the other terminal on the switch. I don't actually show it in the video, but after I check the switch, make sure everything's connected right, I'm going to go ahead and add hot glue to the back of the switch as well to help seal up all the electrical connections. Now I'm going to need to splice my switch into the main power line for the gun. This gun is actually wired to have a MOSFET in it. One thing I elected not to do was you can make a trigger activated Hutu to where you turn the switch on. This requires wiring it after the MOSFET and hooking it into the source pin. To keep it simpler, I just did the main positive and negative coming from the battery. I wasn't actually able to get this process on tape due to the camera configuration and spacing, so All I did really was solder the negative and positive wires into the main battery line. I know it doesn't look the prettiest. I'd normally hook up a Dean's connector and make it all nice and clean, but I had to use a little bit of electrical tape due to the fact that this is someone else's gun and I didn't have their battery and they're not set up for Dean's, so. All that's left is to put everything back together, test out the gun, and have some fun.